A little bit about that backstory that we got, and that is one of the best introductions I've ever had. Product security, obviously very, very important to BlackBerry. I don't think it's a secret. We were one of the earliest adopters of having a product security team. I'll go into a timeline a little bit here, but along with Microsoft, it is very important to us. You know, a few key reasons why. There's no rule book. Product security is basically getting up every morning, figuring out what's happening to you in your future, and then figuring out how to drive the company for adoption. So why do we care? A lot of you probably still remember BlackBerry as a handset maker. We're not a handset maker anymore. We haven't been a handset maker for quite a long time. I love this graphic because it shows a lot about where BlackBerry products actually are currently. A week doesn't go by where I figure out BlackBerry's in something that I didn't know they were in before. So if you go to a restaurant and you go to the soda machine where you get to pick your flavor and it picks your syrup, you know, and you get to pick Sprite with cherry or strawberry or whatever, that actually BlackBerry's in that machine. That's QNX running that. I know, who knew, right? So it's all these really odd places I find myself trying to be a defender in. How do you defend something like that? It is very eye-opening when you sit back and you think about all the places that we've become from, you know, the early days of making handsets. We are an end-user product. We are an OS vendor. We are an SDK vendor. Someone is incorporating our technology and deploying it all over the place. And when they deploy it offline, it's one thing. But when someone's deploying it into a nuclear reactor, that's a completely another story. So we have kind of the long spectrum of what we need to worry about for product security. And what is product security operations? That's actually a question I get asked from the bigger companies wanting to know kind of what my role is at BlackBerry with a curious eye, saying, okay, so what does a head of product security operations do? It's a great question. So I have the communications team. I have our tools team, which builds custom tooling for defending all of these different things that we're in. I have the incident response team. And then I have all the programs, so the open source office that we've stood up at BlackBerry, some of the compliance and the governance pieces that we're working forward right now with product security as it evolves. So a little bit of a historical view, and what does product security actually do? This is a fun little timeline, and this is not a scientific process putting these dates together, so please don't look up at this timeline and think, well, you know, 2005, that's not correct. But, you know, think about this for a second. It's 2019, and back in 2005, product security issues and response was a PR problem. I know I was talking to Katie yesterday, and I think it's about 2002, really, when Microsoft was at the point where when there was a vulnerability report, the PR team got it. They were more worried about controlling the public noise about it than they were actually fixing the software. So it's 2019, you guys. That's not a lot of time since then, right? And then it was about 2006, 2008 or so when we really figured out that product security could cause catastrophic damage to a company. If you had a breach or you had a vulnerability, malware just really started to get really important right about then, you could actually tie that back to monetary damage at a company. So really, that's 10 years ago. We are not, I mean, that's not a lot of time in the big scheme of things. And around 2010 or so, we started seeing companies change and go, wow, okay, maybe we need to start looking at remediating some of these vulnerabilities in our software, and maybe we need help to do that, right? So we have the bug bounty where it was kind of born, and it was okay to start saying, okay, my software is flawed, and I need help in order to fix it. That is a really huge leap from a PR problem 5 years before that, right? And then in 2014 or so, not far after that, we started having media coverage around naming vulnerabilities, right? Not only did we look at paying for vulnerability patching, or vulnerabilities in general, but we looked at, oh my gosh, now it has a name and a marketing campaign, right? We have Heartbleed, and we have all these things. And right about this interesting time frame in 2014, not even 5 years ago, which totally still blows my mind, we started looking at the dynamic shift between a single vulnerability being reported to it actually costing companies money, whether or not it was exploitable. That was a huge turning point for BlackBerry. When I stood up in front of my SLT and gave them reasons and data points to say, it doesn't matter. You may or may not be impacted by this vulnerability, but guess what? It doesn't matter. Because if the media thinks you are, and the press thinks you are, and you don't do a good job in your incident response programs, and you don't put programs together to defend yourself, guess what? You're still going to pay for it. Whether or not I can get up in front of the press and say, in fact, we are not vulnerable to this, if I can't get there, it doesn't matter, because the media piece will just make it so anyway, right? And who doesn't want to take BlackBerry down, right? Everybody, the security brand, that's the security brand. There were a lot of companies for a long time that would have liked to have seen us not be BlackBerry anymore, let's put it that way. So here we are to 2019. It brings us about here and where I am right now. The main thing that I'm focused on, probably this year and probably next year, and we'll go into this a little bit more here in a few minutes, is standards and policy. What you have seen in the last probably 2 or 3 or 4 years in the IT side of customers looking at networks and holding people accountable to ISO standards and to data standards and to all those fun words that you've heard is now happening to software. And if you don't think it's happening, you're crazy, because it completely and absolutely is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what product security currently does in the SDLC. And I mean, this is not, nobody's going to look at this and disagree with me. This is a bit of a relationship piece that I've had to build over the years. And what I've really realized is all these great things that I'm doing to secure the SDLC and working on the architecture and the hardening requirements in the beginning. We're going around and doing some threat modeling and design review. We're doing some education on how to build better, more secure software with all of our fun data that we have from the cert, right? We're doing security testing and code review. We're doing release guidance and response. We look at the health of our software when we release it. It's a huge program we have at BlackBerry. Everything has a gate, right? Every single thing. And where we really struggled in building the Product Security Alliance that really helped us over the last 5 years were relationships, because this is really what the dev teams and what our software vendors felt like we were actually doing, which was in the beginning we were kind of helping. They were like, yeah, this is helpful. Yeah, this is great. Thanks for that design review. And yes, this class of vulnerabilities, we could totally remediate this. But then what happened is we came to them and started complaining. You must fix this vulnerability. It is really, 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 really bad, and you must fix it. And our dev teams were like, why? And then we would say, well, it's a critical. And then they would say, so? And then we would say, okay, we're just going to wait. We'll be chilling over here. We're going to tell you to patch it. It's critical. It's super bad. And we're just going to chill out while you guys go figure out how to patch that, right? And then when they didn't, we would go tattle to the CSO. And we would say, you know, that super major release for that really big product, they didn't fix that vulnerability. And you should probably go do that. And then guess what we would try to do? We would try to gate the release. And that, my friends, is not the way to do product security well. That is the way, you can do it that way, but the problem is that you're not going to get very far because you're going to ruin relationships before you can have a chance to encourage them. So, you know, we need to make friends. That's the biggest thing that I can give you as my takeaway in this role for the last 5 years, is that if you try and push product security uphill against your development team, it's not going to work, because all you're going to do is end up getting your CISO in front of the development organization arguing about critical vulnerabilities. So again, this is why we're here. We need to stay scrappy. This is one of the biggest things where when I get in front of my SLT, I have heard this more times than one. Christine, this is what we love about you guys. You're scrappy. You just figure it out, right? So if we don't run friends and influence people with dev, we got to figure out a way to have better relationships. So this was about 2014 and 15 timeframe when I really sat down and realized the crux of it doesn't matter whether or not Heartbleed completely every single piece of your software you're remediating it, because it matters what your customers think. So I had to take that and I had to realize I have to work with development to get them to understand more of what we need to do and less of what they think we're trying to do, which is gate their software, which isn't the point, right? So here's some of the things we did. Back then, a friend, Jake Koons, and I, who's actually here from Risk-Based Security, we got together and we thought, you know what, there's got to be a way where we can help communicate to these bigger companies and to our dev teams internally how to do product security together, right? We all want the same thing. We just can't run and win when we're at the end of the SDLC telling them their software has a bunch of vulnerabilities that didn't patch and ask them why they did it. So we looked at creating this model. This model was really helpful, and again, this was presented at Black Hat in 2016. And this was a really great thing for BlackBerry, because what it allowed us to do, it allowed us to take all of those acquisitions. You know, BlackBerry went through a period of time where going from the handset vendor to doing all of those acquisitions, we had to have a way to look at all those companies coming in and say, what does your product security footprint look like, right? All those acquisitions from 0 to 100 were in different places in their security maturity model. Some of them were doing some things, some of them were doing other things, but overall, none of them were doing everything that we were already doing. So we had to figure out a way to look at them and say, okay, whatever company we bought, you're here, and we need to help you get up to 5, right? So this model is really interesting. And since we released this model at Black Hat, it's awesome. We've had tons of companies actually take this model, and this is really simple. At the bottom, it's kind of like level 1, you're not doing anything, right? It's casual chaos, something like Heartbleed hits, a bunch of your customers call, and they say, are you impacted? And you don't know, because you really don't know. You scramble, and you call your dev product people, and you say, are you impacted? And they say, I don't know. You have a holding statement with your PR team, and you run around with, it's pretty much not very much fun, right? Level 1 on your maturity, or level 2 in your maturity model should really be looking at what it looks like to have an incident response process. At BlackBerry, we have our product security team obviously is independent. There are distributed models that work very well where you're embedding your incident response people with the product teams. That works. Either way, you have an incident response process, right? So that's kind of the maturity, the first step in maturity. So in something like, Heartbleed or named vulnerability, if that's your minimum hits, you're not scrambling all over the place to figure out, how do you respond to that? You have a process, and it's built, right? Level 3 is really where I think things get a lot more expensive, but the return on investment is a lot better too. And that's mastering operations, and that's a lot of where I came in to help BlackBerry get to where they are now, which is looking at things like, are you doing a bug bounty, or are you at least having some kind of effort to look at vulnerabilities in your software, to identify them before your customers find them, or before they go public that you're impacted. That is having a PR process, that is having a disclosure process, that is having an advisory process, all those operational things that take vulnerabilities away from the focus and make it all about building cohesive product security operations. That's level 3. Level 4 is where I really love, this is my favorite part, and level 4 is where you take those operations and you look at automating them. So you bring in Jake and his tool to do intelligence feeds into your product's space so that you know daily when vulnerabilities are happening instead of looking once a release or once a quarter, which if you're not looking at anything now, that's helpful, but once a quarter is not enough. Once a GC release is not enough. So you're looking at those things daily. I have some stats I'll share in a minute around some of our vulnerability data, but when you get to this point, it is incredible how much easier it gets when it's automated, right? And then the ultimate goal of level 5, and it's where we try to get every product at BlackBerry, and again, some of them come in at different points, but the smart SDLC, yay, you have all this rich data coming out of your incident response piece that you built in level 2, and you mastered it in level 3, and now you're automating it in level 4. Build smarter products, If you have all that data and you can feed it back into the beginning of the SDLC where it's cheaper, your product teams love you because you stop complaining at the end of the SDLC. You start helping them build more secure software. And the most beautiful part is it's a lot cheaper, so it's easier to get money, is how I found. So anyway, Jake and I presented on this model, and it has gone amazingly well. I will tell you, I was very shocked at how many of large companies who shall remain nameless that are nowhere in this model, and I am constantly surprised when they call me and ask me to come and talk to them about level 3, and I'm thinking to myself, but you're so-and-so company. You should probably be telling me how to do this better. And their comment to me is, no, we haven't built anything. So anyway, a little bit of stats around what we do for open source software, and this isn't typical to mean that it's all open source, but open source is the majority of the things that obviously we work on. So we have over 2,300 unique libraries being monitored right now in our incident response team. That's crazy to me. Still can't believe we do that much. We do have multiple versions of each unique library in products. And when we presented this at Black Hat and disclosed that we had 63 versions of an open source library in one product, it was really funny. People were shocked. But then about a week, 2 weeks later, I started getting emails where companies were like, oh yeah, after that talk, I went back and dug. I've got hundreds. We thought 60-some was a lot. It isn't a lot, right? That's what I've learned since 2016. And 98% of our PCerts investigations are related to open source libraries. We do look at BlackBerry authored code, but most of it is open source offenders. So the main message here in looking at all this data is playing a whack-a-mole here is really hard. So if you're using 100 copies of OpenSSL across your business, and that means your business needs to apply that patch 100 times, that's hard, right? So you really need to go back to that level 4 on that pyramid and work on automation. So I'm going to refresh, and I did this yesterday, but refreshing some of my 2018 vulnerability data, because I share this every year when I speak on anywhere in the pyramid, and 2018 was real. Y'all, I'm from Texas, so I can say that. It was real, y'all. It was. 2018 was a really hard year for us. The numbers I'm going to show you are from 2017 to 2018 only, in a year, which should wow everybody here, because this is crazy. We investigated almost 9,000 vulnerabilities. If you knew how small my team was, you would be completely impressed, because that's a lot. That's 200% more than we did in 2017. We filed 7,218 software defects. Most of that's automated. Part of our custom tooling that we've built, we built a feed off of some of Jake's data from risk-based security, and we automatically file JIRAs against our software, which is pretty awesome. Only way we could do 7,218 in a year. But the big note there is it's 56% more of what we did the year before. We investigated 900 cases. 900 software vulnerability cases where we couldn't immediately make a determination, so that's a lot as well. And this is the biggest number that actually really shocked me, was a 50% increase in customer inquiries. And I want to define to you what a customer inquiry is. When we patch a software vulnerability, we make that information available to CSO so that they can directly tell the customer what they need to know. 218 inquiries are vulnerabilities we didn't know about out of all the intelligence that we watch and could not answer off the cuff. That's a lot. That's, for us, that is a huge amount. And again, the big note is it's 50% more than we're in 2017. So that should tell you something. So takeaways here are the SDLC is hard. Coordinating across large and dispersed development teams, really hard. And again, there is no rule book, right? So what's the future of product security working on? And this is really where we take all of that fun stuff we just talked about, we looked at on our timeline where we're shifting to in 2019, because this is where I'm spending most of my time prepping BlackBerry for right now. And I know Microsoft is working on similar things. And again, kind of why we're partnering here is this really fun picture of standards and regulation pieces that are coming. Now, again, you look at this picture and you can see some of these things and you're like, oh yeah, SOC 2, yeah, my company's working on that, but it doesn't have anything to do with product security. It does now. It does as of this year. And the biggest reason, and I will tell you this why, is because again, regulation is coming to software and software security, whether or not you like it or whether or not you are ready. I can tell you that I have spent, it's coming, it is coming. And one of the reasons why we're here today is because it is coming. I can tell you I have spent a lot of my last 6 months talking to financial companies for BlackBerry on behalf of us. And I will tell you here, I'm going to do my best to sum up in the time that I have left the why. Customers, especially in financial and regulated, are looking at software running in their ecosystem as that you are now a vendor of my company and you are now in my network and in my system. Therefore, I am going to hold you to all these audits that I am being held to because you are a third-party vendor now running inside of my network. That is absolutely you can probably all know, I don't even need to say which financial company that started with, and absolutely they should start with this kind of thing because they're in hot water and they need to worry about it, right? But it took me about 7 months of working with them to understand what audits they were going to hold this against you and what that put me as a third-party software vendor into, because I have to help them pass those audits. And I had 3 executives look me dead in the face and say, Christine, you are either going to help us pass these audits or you are going to hurt us from passing these audits, and if you don't help us, we won't buy your software anymore. So I had to take that back to my C-level and I had to say, guys, see all these? Like, you guys are worried about these on the network side, but guess what? This is all going to start impacting everything we do. So this is the big project that I'm pushing forward right now in 2019 for BlackBerry, is how do I get the single thread of all of these? There's existing HIPAA, GDPR, New York Cybersecurity Act, the ISO standards we're familiar with. How do I look at the new ones in system infrastructure and compliance like FedRAMP and ProB, which we're calling CANRAMP because it's similar. And then SOC 2 audits, right? I have to worry about systems and infrastructure there. And then how do I look at lacking but emerging things like the SBOM, right? We know that's coming. It's going to be regulated. We know it. We don't know what the picture looks like yet, but it is coming. And then how do I look at things that are newly enacted, like things that California is driving that are similar to GDPR, 21434 for auto. Obviously, we have QNX, and so that's a big deal. But how do I pull the single thread? If I look at all these controls, it's nauseating. There's no way to track this, right? So what is the single thread to pull? It's open source software, right? If I can't get a handle on open source software for BlackBerry, I am not going to be able to manage any of this forward momentum for any of these, and that's the message. So is the ecosystem ready? I'm going to run out of time, so I'll quickly go through the last part. So I just spoke at RSA on something completely different, on the software release process and the pyramid, but I asked some really good questions in the polling, and this is very fun information. So the first question I asked is, does your company have a software quality checkpoint before release? Well, yes, 75% of the people in the room said, yes, I have one. So my question was, okay, so if you're reviewing, software releases, are you reviewing security debt as part of that? Do you know when you ship a gold candidate to the world and you're not going to update that software for another 9 months, do you know what you're shipping with? Is it 10 moderates? Is it 20 criticals? Is it none? Have you even looked? So interestingly enough, only 10% of those people were actually looking at their one ability, one chance to reduce their attack surface, that software update. That's their only chance, and only 10%. And these are big companies, you guys. I'm telling you, y'all, these companies, you'd be crazy. You'd be shocked if you knew who they were. So my follow-up question to that was, are you then comfortable with the level of oversight your company has for open source software? Whether or not you are shipping it in a product, or you are internally consuming it in your network inside your company, are you comfortable with the level of oversight that your company has into either your attack surface reduction or your attack surface increase? Because let's be clear, it's one of two. You're doing one of two things. You're either increasing that attack surface or you're reducing it. And 5%. 5% of big companies are comfortable. And this is a CISO level audience, so they know what they're doing. I knew it would be low, but I didn't quite think it would be that low. So here's our takeaways from all this information, right? It isn't about fixing vulnerabilities. It's not about all software being flawed, and Jake, that's for you, because I know that's one of the things that makes you cringe. It's not security through obscurity, because it's not. It is about security maturity, though. It is about us being together, working on some of these common solutions. It's about a tactical level effort, because it's also not enough to talk about it, right? So let's be resourceful and realize that we need friends. We need to start talking about some of these bigger things, especially as we go into 2019 and we look at things like regulation that's coming to product security and software, and let's work together and be friends. Last, I will leave you with, this is what it cost BlackBerry to remediate Freak. And I know that's old. It's an old data sample because I put all of the process in place to reduce that cost since then. And this is the last slide that I'm going to share with you quickly. So the benefits of a mature open source security system, a software system, and operations investment are here. If anybody needs these data points, I've given them to a lot of really big companies to take back to their C-level audience to say, hey, we don't have product security operations. We should probably look at investing in this, right? We saved $87,000 in large media events in a quarter. This isn't a year, this is a quarter. We filed 401% more defects against open source in a year. So that's what the investment got us. The cost of supporting open source decreased 62% per product, and I proved that with data. Intelligence to defect ratio was 87% more efficient. So the noise that comes in, we were able to actually reduce that down to being 87% more efficient with the signals to noise ratio, which can get overwhelming if it's really noisy. Our investigation times were 46% faster. So we took data and intelligence, and we were able to investigate our casework 46% faster. And then fixes got to customers, the best data point of all, we reduced our attack surface down to the customer 12 times faster than we did the year before. So, and that's it for me, and I will leave and take questions. Can you discuss the origin of the vulnerable reports your team investigated, internal versus external? Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that BlackBerry does very heavily is we invest a lot in intelligence, a ton. If you haven't met Jake Koons, you need to go talk to Jake Koons. He has a product that is amazing that we get intelligence feeds from daily, and it's CVE data. I don't want to argue about CVE, I'm just saying. I'm just saying, it is. You have to realize that when I get up in the morning, I have to deal with public versus non-public, right? And I have to acknowledge it whether or not I agree with it or not. So, but Jake Koons has an absolutely fantastic intelligence product. We built a tool that sucks in his intelligence and kind of spreads it out over our product vertical. We do have several other sources that we follow. I mean, some of this, you guys, is free. You know, you can do, you know, keyword searches. You can have that fed into an Outlook box if you want to. Some of it, you just have to be resourceful, right? Internal reports, we do have a research group who does a lot of internal pen testing. We process those reports too. What does 900 cases investigated actually mean? Do you assess impact for each open source vulnerability or just have the product team take updated versions available? Great question. 900 cases investigated, we investigate everything. And we rescore. So we don't take a CVSS score that comes with a vulnerability. We assess impact against each and every product because, you know, CVE 2018-222 may be impacted differently on UEM than it is on workspaces. It just may be different. So we investigate everything against each product, score it individually. We file it. We do use Jira. And then we work with the product teams to track and fix that. Now, the big heavy hitter there is we have a software release gate that I was saying. So we have a release process where software does not leave the company until a certain level and threshold of vulnerabilities have been remediated.